In this video, I'm going to discuss the one of the theories I noticed myself using in the classroom. I noticed without actually meaning to do it, and that was behaviorism. It took place when I was in the Cloverblad classroom with the gifted children. I was leading my class in the Xingjiao lesson on Chinese New Year, and what happened was the teacher, Angeline, she had to leave the classroom for whatever for whatever reason. So I was leading the class, I was fine with this. I went for about 5 minutes, I let all the children continue their work, then I gave them a specific task. And upon completing the task, I then tried to get the attention of the children by saying, okay, we'll come back to this. But these children were 6 or 7, so they didn't exactly understand me. So what ended up happening was I remembered when the children were all chatting amongst themselves and weren't really paying attention. What Angeline did was this. And she would stand at the front of the class just like that until all the children noticed and became quiet. So I realised this was happening, so that's what I did. I went up to the front of class and just stood there like this, without saying a word. After about 10 seconds, some of the children started to notice what I was doing, so they'd sit down and mimicked what I was doing. And it took maybe a minute and a half before every child understood. And it worked on every kid but one and that's just because he was walking around going, la, la, la. So for that child, I just had to call out his name and tell him to sit down. He didn't know what I said because I said it in English, but he understood. He knew, okay, I need to be quiet and sit down. And it was upon doing this I realised it was behaviorism, but I wasn't sure if it was classical conditioning or operant conditioning. And then I ended up having about an hour-long discussion with Neve, Kieran and Abla just about this, as to whether or not it was classical conditioning or a form of operant conditioning, because the children were aware of what they were doing, and classical conditioning tends to come from instinct rather than choice. In the case of Pavlov's dogs, the bell goes, they don't choose to salivate, they just salivate. And then with little Albert, hearing the noise whenever he saw the rat, he ended up just becoming terrified whenever he saw rats, or small fluffy animals. So as a result, like we were just discussing, and I was saying that it wasn't classical conditioning because the children were making the choice to sit down. But then it was just like, were they using operant conditioning? Is it using operant conditioning to make classical conditioning a scenario, the goal? And after this long discussion, we still didn't have a definitive answer. And I believe that there must be different forms of classical conditioning if what happened was deemed to be classical conditioning. And yes, that's one of the theories I noticed myself using in the classroom.